Hi, Varun. How are you? How's everything going on your side? Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hi, Rafal. I'm great. I'm really excited about this. I think it's a very cool newsletter to be a part of. So yeah, let's do this.
Great. Thank you so much. For those watching, we have Varun Shenoy. He is representing India, and the idea is to create a space to invite international experts in business in different markets around the world to talk about the cultural and communication aspects of doing business in their countries. So, as we've done with the other interviewees, we have 7 questions, and we will begin now. Varun, thank you again for your time. We're curious. Tell us a little bit more about you, what kind of work that you do, please, so everybody watching can learn more about your background.
Yeah, thanks. I have been in the advertising industry for about 15 years, but I have got the opportunity to work not only across India, but also Sri Lanka and, with agencies in Singapore and now New Zealand. So did I did start my career in India. I have spent most of my time there, but currently I'm based in New Zealand. But I have predominantly been in the communications and advertising industry, and I think that's why this cross-cultural newsletter is really interesting to me because I most of the work that I do is across boundaries and across cultures, and it is very important to not only understand who you're speaking to, but how you speak to them. Um, and yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's great to have someone with your profile for this kind of conversation and connection because you have this international experience, international mindset. So we really appreciate having you here and sharing with us. Specifically on speaking about India now, but just remember, just remind everyone who's watching, you do have experience and you have access to work in different markets, as you mentioned already. Great, thank you, Varun. For the second question, what are some of the things you recommend people to do or say when they first meet or speak with a person whom they might want to initiate a new project or business opportunity together in India? What should someone also not do or say, just for the cultural aspect to be aware of?
That's a great question, and just to give a caveat, usually what I say to most people who are trying to enter into Indian markets is think of India almost like a continent, a Europe or a South America, because there's so many different states and cultures and languages. I could feel completely different just doing 100 kilometers in any direction, So that's something to just be conscious about because whatever you think India is, you go to another state, maybe those people may be different. I have had the opportunity of working out of Mumbai. So as a commercial capital of Mumbai, of India, it tends to be a lot more, metropolitan. There's people from all around, and it is business oriented. So in that sense, if you do end up in a city like say Delhi, Mumbai, or Bangalore, uh, invariably English is the language of business. But that said, a lot of business does happen out of the big cities, and that would change the way you communicate very differently. So you need to remember Indians are gregarious people. They're very community driven. But when it comes to business, they may have a different persona. So they may not be really happy, or they may not be really open to talk about family immediately off the bat. Maybe as you get friendlier, there are things that you can open different doors. There is a lot of indirect communication. There is body language. So I would say straight off the bat, be honest, be transparent, be the person you are. And I think Indians get it; they understand that because you have the India being such a melting pot of different cultures and people. A lot of Indians, and especially in the business industry, pride themselves on being street smart. They don't like to feel scammed. They don't like to feel like they're being sold to. So if there's an honest conversation, I think that's the way to go. I think that's really the way to do it. And like I said, the business environment can tend to be a little more formal. So dress up for that occasion. Meet someone halfway at that point. Of course, the tech industry say the Amazons of the world. They'd be in t-shirts. They won't be in ties and suits. But invariably, most of the business is done in a formal capacity. So that's always something good to keep in mind.
Great,
Yeah. Did
great
that answer? Yeah.
insights. No, great insights. And one thing, just to remind everyone, like you said, India is it's its own continent. I mean, it's so diverse, so many people from all over. So, but what you mentioned is important because having this commonalities perhaps across all these the formality and the way you approach your approach to them might be a little bit more common amongst all the diverse cultures. But yeah, great insights. And like also for people watching to remember that there are different cities. Mumbai is one of the biggest cities, and the big cities in India are really big cities. So they have to understand also different realities in the big cities, in urban areas, or the rural areas will be quite different. But yeah, great insights. Thank you. Going for the third question, we also recognize that it's important to have a deeper cultural understanding of a local place when doing business there. What cultural aspects might be considered when doing business in India?
Um, Again, yeah, these questions make me really, deep dive and think about it. And very interestingly, like I also mentioned, Indians tend to be gregarious. They tend to be really full of life, quite a lot like South Americans as well. So you should not take uh, too much offense, say if they interrupt you or they talk over you or they quickly check a phone call. It's just how things are done. Major festivals, if there's national holidays, try to avoid planning meetings during that time, because invariably they will be attending family events and or flying around, stuff like that. Another interesting thing to keep in mind is seniority. Quite a lot like Asian markets, say like Japan and stuff. If you meet a group across a table, address the senior first. If you're saying goodbye, address the senior. So that seniority does matter in India, where there is a very clear hierarchy of the senior most person in the room is the person you would predominantly maintain eye contact with or address. And I'm not saying don't address the others, but it's just a question of hierarchy in conversation. That's something interesting to keep in mind. Obviously, Indians are also famously vegetarians a lot of the time. I'm saying again, it's not across the board, but just if you're setting up a meeting that's with food, that's something to keep in mind, because I know a few people who've made that mistake where they would not even assume, like, if you're doing chips and dip, you don't even realize a lot of the dip may have fish in it, or so these are things that you just don't consciously think if you're not part of that culture. But in India, that's very serious. Egg consumption may not happen, whereas some vegetarians may have, anyway, it's just dietary preferences. Basically, that's something good to keep in mind. Another interesting cultural thing is physical contact. Usually, physical contact, avoid, start with a handshake, or if the person in front of you is doing the namaste, just roll with that, because invariably across genders physical contact is not encouraged. But ironically, within genders, like if there's a man and another man in the room, you may get a few pats on your shoulder or pat on the arm, and similar women to women. So don't get weirded about that. It's just be like, hey, let's go for lunch. There'll be a little pat. So there's that. So it's one of those things that you learn on the fly. But yeah, these are things that come to my mind. Also, again, I would say most businesses are very professional, but sometimes things like time, commitment, like if you've been given a 11 o'clock meeting, it may overflow to an 11:15, and so these are things to be a little flexible about. Again, it's not saying Indians are generally tardy, but sometimes it's just flexibility just helps that relationship go a long way. Yeah.
Great. Well, no, well noted. All the check marks. Good. Great tips. Great tips. You covered a lot of cultural aspects, so that's fantastic. Thank you, Varun. The fourth question, you mentioned English already a little bit, but it's an important question because I know you can correct me, but there's probably hundreds of languages in India. But
Yes.
but in terms of business, it is more focused on English. If someone does not speak English, what do you suggest a foreigner do to be able to communicate more successfully with locals in India and to be able to do business there? So tell us a little bit about this. English is the common language for business, but how do you, if you don't speak English, how do you go around? If the foreigner doesn't speak English, how does he go around working in India?
Yeah. Again, another good question. Predominantly, yes. A lot of the larger multinational companies, the FMCG companies, yes, all the mode of communication is mostly English, even from experience. Of course, there's a lot of banter that may switch to Hindi or the regional language, so you would miss out on those not like informal suggestions. I'm not saying it's not formal, but just informally, hey, how's it going? Whatever. So that may be something you'd miss out on. But what I would suggest is if you go into, say, a town like a tier B or tier B or a C town, which is not predominantly English, you also need to keep in mind that the second language, though people would normally associate with Hindi, as a national language. It actually isn't. It's only mostly spoken in the northern hemisphere, northern part of India. The southern states speak their own in like languages like say Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, and those will be predominantly spoken in say states like Bangalore, Hyderabad. So that's something to keep in mind. So even if there is a hey, we may need to have a translator, you need to be very conscious about which state you're conducting business in. That said, usually what I have seen a lot of international companies do is enter with a local partner. So there is already someone you have who you trust, and they can sort of become a translator. And worst case scenario, just have a translator in the room. That's obviously the most efficient way to do it. But yeah, that's just something to keep in mind because yeah, languages change, and it's not necessary the second language of communication will be Hindi. There are a lot of states that even in the Northeast, where Hindi is not the second language. So that's just something, but it depends on what business. Like where are they entering? Is there a factory in a smaller town? Those are conversations always that you need to keep in mind. Yeah.
No, very clear. It's, yeah, you said case by case, depending what region, where is it the business that they want to do, what part of India. You can get local translators. So yeah, very, very clear. Yeah, no, it's a challenge in other markets, but I know in India because of the diverse of language, you really have to
Absolutely.
prepare yourself well as a foreigner to understand, or a local partner, not only for the English but the local cultural understanding, of course,
Yeah.
as well.
For cultural understanding.
Yes,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
that's it. A lot of the business, like you said, because even our schooling, a lot of the schools have English as a standard of medium. So invariably there will be a good conversation and an understanding between people across a business table. It's just in case it's rural or factories or you're getting off that boardroom table, then possibly. But otherwise, I think most of the time in India you could have a good conversation in English. Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Varun. The fifth question has to do more with marketing channels. To get better results in visibility or sales, what are your recommendations on the most effective ways to do marketing for products or services in India? So it's really focused on how does a foreigner reach its audience? How do they communicate? How do they do marketing, right?
Right. I mean, straight off the bat, I mean, that's my field. I've been in advertising and communications. Straight off the bat, there is no silver bullet, right? Each brand, each organization would have a different target market, a different audience. Usually, because India is 1 billion people, you need to find a niche and then figure out what's the most effective way to target that niche. For most companies, obviously, if you are a Coca-Cola or you're a Unilever, you're going mass. In which case, in India, television is still big. You go to TV, you put your advertising on TV, but that also means a lot more money in production, in media. But if you're a smaller business and you're trying to go niche, then invariably social media, you can go regional in terms of outdoor hoardings. But you have to remember, India, again, is a trust-based society. If they like you, if they bought into your product, they feel you are coming from a place of that you can trust them, there will be a lot more brand loyalty, which means word of mouth is really strong. So it again depends on where you sit on that, how big your target market is and how much budgets you have. But what you're essentially trying to achieve over the long run is build trust, build word of mouth. So even if you're entering the mass markets, a lot of brands within it would work with celebrities. Of course, the risk with celebrities is also if they do something not quite right, you sink with that ship. But usually in India, what happens is these celebrities are very well managed. So if you have the budget, a lot of companies would enter that way. Smaller scale now, influencers and social media, that's pretty big as well. But my suggestion, again, from some experience working with international companies that did enter India, is have a local partner. Work with a local agency, because the nuances that they have about influencers, about the sort of celebrity you work with, about the many other nuances is a lot more, I think, essential, because you can either go tone deaf or invest in the wrong channel just because you think that's best practice abroad. In India, you still need those that local touch, and I think it helps to work with a local agency, whether it comes to public relations, it comes to social media, it comes to influencer engagement, or just advertising. So for me, that's the best. So even if you have an international partner, work with someone who synergizes locally, and I think that would definitely be helpful in terms of marketing channels. One thing to keep in mind is Instagram is really big as opposed to TikTok because TikTok is not present in India. That's just one of those flags because of legal barriers. TikTok is not present in India, so most of social media runs across Facebook, Instagram. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, great. That's I was gonna ask you that on social media specifically. And correct me if I'm wrong, LinkedIn is also very, very popular there. It's one of the biggest
Among
communities in
business,
the world, I think, LinkedIn, right? So,
among business communities, yes, it's not a great sales
okay,
channel,
okay.
but for business networking, yes. I mean, absolutely, yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. So, no, great, great. A lot of good inputs. Instagram, Facebook, but the key is to really focus on the local connections and building that trust, which sometimes the digital world, it's hard to build
Yeah,
it. So, great.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
very,
also, if you want to go really mass, you need to go TV or print, because India is
got it.
still a little old school that way. It still has
Sure.
really mass areas, radio. So, those are still avenues that are open, which a lot of, places are now shutting down, thinking, hey, social media is better for return on investment. But I think India still has that scope of, reaching the masses if that's where your product wants to go. Yeah.
No, great, great. No, yeah, it's clear that the foreigners looking to expand there has to take that into account. Great, thank you, Varun.
Yeah.
What is the sixth question, which has a little bit to do with trust as well? You build trust through building empathy, right? So this question
Yeah.
is really focused on empathy. Is if a business partner in India wants to get to know you better, take you to a local coffee shop, tea place, restaurant, or even a virtual happy hour, not like we do nowadays. What are the kind of topics people in India like to talk about that's not related to business, for example?
Yeah. I think this is the fun question. No. So, again, like I had said earlier, uh, Indians, once they open up, can be really fun, and they can go off the cuff, and you all can have great banter. But it's that fine balance of, if it's your first meeting, you first tread water. Obviously, if there is a connection, as any two humans anywhere in the world, you can take it from there, and you can go for a holiday even. But initially, I would suggest stay off the controversial stuff like religion and off late politics, because these are polarizing conversation. So I would just stay off that initially. Later, if you're friends, it's fair play. But there's a joke in communication that says, when you have nothing else to talk about, you talk about weather. So that's always a great that's a great place to start. You say, hey, wow, it's so hot today, and everyone will have something to say about weather. Uh, if you're talking to a peer, it's not, you feel that you're a culturally peer, you can always talk about what you're watching, the shows, Netflix. But it again depends, that's something that you have to um, gauge. Obviously, the big topic, Indians love their sport, they love their cricket. So much like South America has football, India has cricket. So if you follow a little bit, you can always ask, hey, who's the captain or what's happening? And there's always I always joke, every Indian boy grew up thinking they're going to be in the Indian cricket team. So if it's a male, definitely. If it's a female, she's probably begrudging that her father or some male person has spent a lot of time watching cricket. So maybe there is a wash off. But no, just generally across India, whether it's males or females, cricket is, even if you're not passionate about it, it's in the main sphere of communications, because there's an Indian Premier League which takes up a couple of months, and all the advertising is just revolved around it. It includes a whole bunch of states, so it's pan India. So that's always a great conversation. One part where anyone can really come together is traffic. Indians love hating the traffic. So oh my gosh, what was that traffic? That's always a good icebreaker if you've got to someplace. But yeah, that's always good. And if you're meeting over food, that's always awesome. So if you're meeting a local partner, you can always encourage them to take you to their favorite restaurant, or try a local cuisine if you're being adventurous. But that's always also a good conversation, because Indians also, a lot of Indian occasions, uh, um, holidays, uh, family occasions, anything is all circled around food. So there's always what's for dinner, or what's going to be on the menu. So that's always food's always a great conversation to have. But just keep in mind the vegetarian, non-vegetarian aspect. A lot of Indians don't eat beef. So those are things just to keep in mind, because beef has cultural connotations, and pork for other religions has other connotations. So these, I would just avoid that. But otherwise, food is always great. And then once you're, and then family, because like in New Zealand, people invariably say what I did on the weekend. I did this with my family, or I took my daughter cycling, whatever. In India, I'd say gauge it. Maybe if you talk about yourself and they open up, cool. But usually the first meeting, people would be a little guarded in terms of their personal and professional life. But as it goes down, yeah, you can always say, you can start off and say, this is what I did, or this is what my family is. And if they open up, cool. But otherwise, that's also a space that I would watch for. Yeah. But I think, yeah, that's loosely, yeah, that's the space.
No, great directions that we can take. If we initiate some topics and they react well, we can get more deeper into that. Sports.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I had a lot of Indian friends. I learned about cricket through my Indian friends.
Okay.
I played with them a little bit, so I really liked it. And I was very surprised to know a lot of them also like football, and a lot of them cheer for Brazil, which is my country. So we connected a lot through that aspect as well. And just to comment as well, Bollywood, the cinema, the movie scene is very recognized around the world too. That might be interesting. When I meet with Indian friends, I ask them about, because it's a huge industry, it's a music industry, and it's
It
very
is. Yeah.
recognized and admired in different places around the world too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So to add to that, again, like I had mentioned, Bollywood is again centered around Mumbai and the northern states, because of it's predominantly Hindi. So there are now the southern states that have their own cinema hubs. I mean, they have Kollywood and Tollywood, and so the Tamil cinema, the Kannada cinema, Telugu cinema, which is now also being recognized internationally at awards functions. So it's, but everyone, yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone loves to talk about their music and their stars and what's the latest movie, and it's just, yeah, it's just one of those things that if they're not Bollywood fans, they may be from a different state. But yeah, you're right, and you're right about football as well. I mean, it's just that it's not played, or rather, we've not achieved as a country internationally at an international level yet. But a lot of Indians have their favorite clubs. They'll be completely, you know, Manchester United or Arsenal or Real Madrid, and you're like, that's not even close to your suburb. But but you're right. I mean, that also can be a great conversation. You're right. Yeah.
but cricket is really interesting because it's an interesting game to learn. Yeah, I didn't know about the Bollywood different regions. I really didn't know. It's a great insight how different regions are developing their own industry as well. That's really cool.
Yeah, and they're really good too. Yeah, the films are really
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
fantastic. Thanks, Varun. Coming to the last question, it's a shorter one. What one word or phrase should everyone learn to say in English, and why, or in Hindi or in other languages in terms of the context of India? What should you suggest people learn when they arrive to India that they should say?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is politically correct, but the joke is always when a foreigner goes to a new country, you learn the swear words. but
It's
I'm not
valid.
going to discuss that here. But that's always the joke, right? I mean, when you enter a new
Yeah,
market,
yeah,
the first thing you figure, what are they saying about me?
yeah.
But no, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Obviously, the most famous, most people do know is the namaste. That's the standard Indian greeting of like a hello, but it's very formal. So that's what you'd hear on a plane or at a formal function. But it's you can't go wrong with it. But again, different culture, different languages. Again, like I said, there's the Indian North and then there's the Indian South, which are different languages. So I would do a little research, just a quick Google before I enter. But the namaste is by far the most polite, but it's very formal. Like if you met someone at a business thing, if you were trying to break the ice, you'd be like hello, or you know you could say namaste as well. I mean, it's just a formal greeting, but I wouldn't say that to a peer usually. Like if I walked into a business meeting, I'd just be like hi. I wouldn't do a namaste unless I'm meeting an elderly family
Mhm.
relative. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's always a good icebreaker. They any Indian would love the fact that a foreigner is making an effort to greet them in their language, and I think that's a good icebreaker.
But
But yeah, I think
Varun,
that the namaste is fair.
but just a quick
Yeah.
question. Namaste will be when you meet them, but also when you leave the meeting, say goodbye. Is it valid as well, or just when you meet them that you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely valid. Nice to meet you. Goodbye. Like everyone, because like I said, medium of education, a lot of Indians has been English. So a lot of them are exposed to the hellos and goodbyes, like hi, goodbye, nice to meet you. That that's fine in most business situations. It's just if you're trying to make that effort to break ice, it just, you'd be endearing as a foreigner to be, hey, this guy has Googled or he knows how to say hi in my language,
Yeah.
which could be not just Hindi, it could be, Tamil, Kannada, Marathi, depending on which state you're conducting business in. And I think that for me, that's more, it would be more of an icebreaker that, hey, this guy's making an effort. So for me, that's the difference. But otherwise, in a formal situation, if you say, nice to meet you, hello, goodbye, these are things that are generally understood. Yeah.
No, great, great. I think, no, it's a good touch. And namaste, it differentiates a little bit than the normal hello, goodbye, whichever. So great. I will take note of that. Thank you, Varun. We've come to the end, Varun. We thank you so much, very much for your time, your enthusiasm. It was a class that we learned, master class here. Thanks for being part of this project. Thanks for sharing your insights, recommendations, your experiences. I hope this interview also benefits you and could bring new opportunities for you as well. And for those watching, I'm going to leave Varun's contact in the LinkedIn article where we're going to summarize of this interview. So you can contact him directly if you have any questions or want to learn more about India or even his own work, like you learned a little bit more here. So thank you again, Varun. Any final comments before we go?
No, thanks a lot, Rafael. I think I think it's really cool what you have achieved in just terms of the number of people from different corners of the world, and I truly believe that the human network is all that matters. It's that human connection, and irrespective of whether it turns into something commercial, I think it's nice to see humans just come together and share, because that's what the world needs right now. We don't need polarized you versus me. We need to understand what makes us us. And I think it's wonderful to be a part of that. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for this positive words and encouragement. Not only the personal part, like you said, but also in the business. People do business with people. People do business with people. So that's important.
Yes.
To understand how people think and react and collaborate. I hope, and I really wanted to get India in this series very, very, very quickly because it's economically, in terms of people, for business wise, it's such an important economy. So, and thank you. It was great to have you representing India, and we'll be in touch. We thank you so much for your time again. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Ciao.
You too. All the best. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.